Okay, let's dive right in. Welcome to today's explainer, where we're going to unpack the incredible, honestly almost unbelievable, story of how a tiny, isolated island nation completely transformed itself on the global stage. We're talking about the Maldives. But hey, scrub those Instagram images of luxury overwater bungalows from your mind for a second. We aren't talking about the tourist paradise of today. We're looking at how a nation practically willed itself into the modern era.
So how exactly does an impoverished, completely isolated British protectorate transform into a modern, prosperous republic in just 50 years? It's like a giant puzzle. And to piece it together, we're leaning on a genuinely fascinating source, the first-hand memoirs of a guy named Ali Umar Maniku. He was a civil servant and trade official who didn't just casually watch this evolution happen. He literally engineered key parts of it from the ground up, working directly under two presidents for over half a century. Maniku actually hit the nail on the head in his logbook. He noted that this was a society stepping straight out of medieval, feudal structures right into the modern era. They essentially skipped centuries of gradual development that other nations had. I mean, think about that. They had to learn absolutely everything right from scratch. To really grasp this, let's compare the two eras. In 1958, the Maldives had absolutely no proper communication system with the rest of the world. We're talking zero telephones, no banks, no regular air service whatsoever. Their only real source of foreign currency was just the ad hoc export of dried fish. They were entirely, utterly cut off from the rest of the globe. Quite the contrast to the global tourism hub of today, right? Section 1. An isolated island sultanate in the mid-20th century. Maniku's personal logbook paints a pretty stark reality of those early days. Right after the Second World War, the population of the entire country had plummeted to just 45,000 people, and they were just scraping by on a heavily rationed diet. Almost nothing of actual nutritional value was grown locally, meaning the average Maldivian hardly got a square meal a day. In fact, Maniku himself was sent away to Ceylon as a kid just to get medical treatment because he was so incredibly weak and malnourished. Which obviously begs the million-dollar question. How does an isolated nation actually survive under conditions like that? With zero real currency reserves and no natural resources other than the ocean, the Maldives had to rely on a highly fragile economic lifeline just to keep its people fed. This arrived on what was essentially a fish-for-rice setup. Here is how it worked. First, they exported dried skipjack tuna, which was known as Maldive fish, over to neighboring Ceylon. Next, the Ceylon government paid them, but deposited those funds into a highly controlled trader's account. Then, the Maldives used those exact funds to buy basic, essential commodities, things like rice, flour, and sugar, to ship back to the capital, Malé. But here's the really tragic irony of the whole thing. A stellar fishing season actually hurt them. The government agreement had strict export quotas, so if they caught a massive surplus of fish, they couldn't even sell it. But they still desperately needed the rice. They were absolutely stuck in this brutal hand-to-mouth existence. Section 2. Building the trade lifeline and learning the ropes of a global economy. So enter a young Ali Umar Maniku. Taking some very practical advice from his merchant father about hard work and humility, a 16-year-old Maniku basically packed up, quit school, and headed to Colombo, Ceylon. His ultimate goal? To learn exactly how global trade worked from the absolute ground up, as an apprentice. He ended up at a simple, totally unassuming Dutch-era shophouse on Reclamation Road in Colombo. But don't let the exterior fool you. This building housed the Maldivian National Trading Corporation, or MNTC. It was the literal beating heart of the country's economy, managing all their cargo ships and vital trade deals. What's wild is that Maniku actually refused a comfortable desk job upstairs. Instead, he marched downstairs to sit right with the wharf clerks and stevedores to learn the gritty, day-to-day reality of port logistics. And man, he learned fast. He discovered the systemic customs corruption going on, learning firsthand how casually folding a 100 rupee note into an import form magically bypassed all those tedious cargo inspections. Applying that kind of street-smart logistical knowledge, Maniku helped the government shift away from slow, unpredictable sailing vessels that were entirely at the mercy of the wind. They started purchasing their own steamships, like the Maldives Star. Eventually, they used this newfound leverage to completely outmaneuver the Bora traders. Those were a foreign merchant community that had held a massive 75% monopoly on Maldivian trade for decades. Section 3. The Southern Island Rebellion, fueled by geopolitical tension. Now, while the economy was shifting, things on the geopolitical front escalated incredibly fast. In 1956, the British signed a highly controversial 100-year lease to build a military staging post on Gon Island in the southern Adu Atoll. By 1959, playing heavily on existing historical tensions, the southern atolls straight-up declared independence, forming the breakaway Suvadiv Islands. The British press, of course, immediately hailed this new state. So in response, the young, highly pragmatic Prime Minister, Abraham Nasser, launched a military expedition to reclaim the territory.
During all this, British officers were essentially just looking on as locals protested the central government. The British tacitly supported the rebel leader, Abdullah Afif. Why? Well, a breakaway administration in the south allowed them to freely construct their military installations on Gan Island without any pesky interference from the capital in Malé.
So Prime Minister Nasser decided he had to put this rebellion down, but he hit a massive roadblock, a total British arms embargo. He couldn't get his hands on any weapons. But once again, Moniku's trade expertise totally saved the day. He creatively and, importantly, legally purchased 100 decommissioned Type 303 police rifles and ammunition through a Somalian export company over in Coventry, England. They sneakily transshipped the weapons under police protection through Colombo and onto a Maldivian vessel. Armed with these, Prime Minister Nasser personally sailed down south, fired a few warning shots at the island of Tanadu, and effectively forced a bloodless surrender.
Section 4. Forging an independent nation with total sovereignty. £100,000. The British eventually realized their classic divide-and-rule tactics had completely failed in the Maldives. This realization led to a brand new agreement in 1960 for the military base, and the British ended up granting the Maldives 100,000 UK pounds. This was a monumental sum for them, and it was used to build Mali's very first central hospital. All of this effort finally culminated in July 1965 in Colombo, where Prime Minister Nasser sat down and signed the official independence agreement. This was the document that formally released the Maldives from British protection. They were entirely on their own now, free to chart their own destiny. But listen, independence wasn't just some ceremonial piece of paper to them. It immediately kicked off a massive wave of scrappy, highly innovative nation building. They installed the capital's first robust electricity grid using British Lister diesel generators. And for entertainment, Nasser actually tasked Moniku with figuring out how to import 35mm Hindi films for their newly built Olympus cinema. They even generated a huge amount of foreign revenue by creatively partnering with a New York agency to sell Maldivian postage stamps to collectors all over the world. They were literally hustling on every single front to build a modern economy. It is absolutely incredible to think about how far the Maldives came in just 50 years, stepping directly out of medieval isolation into the modern globalized world. But as they step fully into a 21st century world full of climate change and mass international tourism, it really leaves you wondering, how will the gritty survival instincts that built the modern Maldives hold up against the existential threats of tomorrow?